It's probably around 9 p.m. I know my heart is in auricular fibrillation and has been for the last 2 hours, since I can detect the irregular heartbeats. I've been receiving medical treatment for my arrhythmia for the last 4 years, after years of going through the rounds of doctors who only diagnosed nervous symptoms. My treatment's ineffectiveness is not understood by the prominent cardiologist who prescribes it. "You've never been particularly keen," he remarked the day before, when I informed him about my pain while taking cortisone. I'm fatigued and on the verge of fainting out when I ask my husband to drive me to the hospital emergency department where my cardiologist works. The diagnosis is confirmed by the intern who is seeing me for the first time. Because I anticipate to leave after the EKG, I asked him to forward the results to my cardiologist, who's not present today. I'm hoping that when he sees it, he'll recognize that if I'm missing enthusiasm, there could be a good explanation for it. The intern refuses to release me after the ECG. He insists on taking me to the emergency department at the end of the corridor. They're quite busy. I'm given a drip and persuade myself that I'll be out of the hospital in an hour or two. Cortisone slowly permeates my veins. Suddenly, I sense a glacier chill encircling my heart region. I don't say anything to Bernard, who's standing beside me. I believe it'll pass. I don't want to frighten him. However, it does not pass. I'm becoming worse and worse. I'm going to go unconscious. My body twists and turns in search of a comfortable position. Breathing gets more difficult for me. I make a hand motion to Bernard to let him know I'm not feeling well. I watched him rush out of his cubicle to seek assistance. I'm now completely alone. My view is muddled. I'd prefer to fast lose consciousness and leave this unpleasant intermediate stage that, in theory, comes just before unconsciousness. But oblivion never arrives. Regardless of how much I muster my last strength to call it to me, I stay trapped in this no man's land that's both black and light, where the air reaches my lungs with increasing difficulty. Then, all of a sudden, it's as if a loud pop has separated my air and blood circulation systems. Nothing happens. I'm out of breath. I'm going to die. I'm unable to move at all. I'm at the opposite end of the corridor from the nurse's station. After what seems like an eternity, I have a shattered perception of the presence of 2 women in white and Bernard, who's saying to them, "She can't respond to you. She can't breathe." "We must request that you go, sir," one of them retorts. I'm in a state of panic. He's the only one who appears to grasp what's going on, and he must leave. The light grows more defined, but the silhouette's shapes become more hazy. I want to scream and struggle. I believe I occasionally lose consciousness. As Bernard will relate later, the 2 nurses came to me and asked me to breathe. Then one of them said to the other, "Quick, go get the doctor." I have no recollection of any of it. Then I'm conscious of the shadows once more. A doctor is bending over me. "Can you hear me, madam? Can you hear me, madam?" I'd like to tell him that I can't breathe anymore and that I'm dying. My muscles do not respond. I can hardly move my little finger, let alone make a sound. I'm in a lot of pain. I'm going insane. I can't even express my feelings to the doctor. So, how can I make myself understood in the midst of this nightmare? A youthful doctor in a yellow-orange light can be seen in the backdrop. He removes his jacket and sets it down. He is impassively observing the scene from a distance. The intern is busy, as are the nurses, but my consciousness shifts and I'm unsure what's going on. I understand that this new doctor is just starting his shift and hasn't gotten the chance to put on his white coat yet. Suddenly, he looks at me with a sparkling, childish smile on his face. His eyes wide in excitement, as if he had just discovered something unique or uncommon, and he exclaims, "Cortisone allergy?" "But she's already been taking it," says the intern in response to his almost triumphal tone. I was thinking of my daughter at this point. She was just 5 years old at the time, and we were waiting for a van to pass by in front of our garage on the side of the road. Unfortunately, a cat sprang out at that very moment. The van's wheel literally blew up that little animal. She gazed carefully at the little bleeding mess, not overjoyed, and exclaimed, "Wow, I've never seen a cat be ran over before." I recall thinking in the emergency department cubicle that the doctor's expression and my daughter's expression were similar. It hit me like a savage punch. The absence of compassion. I was just a fascinating case to this doctor. The shortage of oxygen was excruciating. Even condemned inmates are medicated, I thought to myself. I didn't believe I deserved to die like this. When my entire body was paralyzed, I assured myself that my brain was still functioning, because there was enough oxygen for thinking, but not enough to activate my muscles. When suffocation hits the brain, there's no turning back. I had to justify in order to accept my death. The next stage would be the progressive elimination of perceptions, followed by the emptiness we are accustomed with when we are sedated. I never imagined that death would make me so terrified. The urge for death has always existed within me since I can remember. I'm not sure when I swung into another dimension. It was so violent and unexpected that nothing would ever be the same again. I convinced myself that if I didn't die, I'd be crippled for the rest of my life. My heart was plainly constricting, twisting, and getting fixed. This is the most difficult perception of the heart to convey. It was my heart, both of mine, my entire essence, and a piece of me. It felt as if I knew every cell in my body, complete with all the hues of an undiscovered cosmos. This area horrified me is the only way I can put it. I appeared to be alone on another world. Nobody had ever taught me this. I was the spectator of my own body, which had become both more than real and unneeded. My mind raced through a flurry of ideas, not to mention that I had spent the previous 50 years living next to my own body, which felt unthinkable. I could see the medical staff operating on my body, but not as a thinking, suffering human. I felt myself being abandoned by people and then by life. So I vowed to myself that if I made it out alive, if I came face to face with someone's lifeless body, I would talk to them anyhow, give them my hand, remind them they're not alone, and to keep trusting. They were in the midst of an emergency, which I understand. But my God, how could I have missed a hand in mine, a consoling phrase, or even just a look? I believe that leaving life in these conditions is more difficult than enduring physical pain. Then things became more tranquil. The lighting is gentler. I no longer appear to be running low on oxygen. Fear flew away and abandoned me. I had the sensation of floating. Everything appeared to be light and serene. Amid this sense of bliss, in an environment of somber gold, which seems as close to a description in familiar words as possible, but is not the reality, my last thought was, my name is Marie. I was born on August 30, 1957, and I'm going to die in 4, 3, 2. The gaps between the numbers grew wider and wider, until I was gently dragged out through the right side of my skull. I was enveloped in an unimaginably peaceful and beautiful light. I felt so light, a sense of pleasure I'd never felt before, a full letting go. I could observe the scene inside the cubicle while remaining removed from it. One of the nurses removed my drip and said to the other, "Dopamine." I felt fantastic. Suddenly, I was back at the examining table, feeling quite nauseous. I arrived with difficulty, like if I were a fish out of water. I was panting for breath. It jolted its way into my hibernating lungs. Then I managed to say, in jumbled tones, "I'm going to get sick." A kidney dish was delivered to me by a hand. I was raised up and then became ill. I was gasping for air. I felt mobility return to me, painfully, but with it, life. With unheard of strength, I squeezed the nurse's forearm as if to shatter it. They gave me the maximum amount of oxygen to restart my apparatus. I knew I had a close call with death. I hadn't had time to think about the date. 5 November 2005. My life should have ended on this date. I resent the dopamine that brought me back to life, and the endless minutes of agony. I had paid a high price for my heaven. Several days of agony followed, as I was terrified of ingesting food or medicine that would trigger the allergic reaction. So intense was the suffering that preceded death, the agony that preceded the brief glimpse of bliss. I was extremely sensitive to scents and loud noises for a few days. I'd get a strong odor of gasoline if Bernard only went into the garage. It smelled like pee and sweat in the hospital. The sounds could be heard through the partitions. Then it all faded away one by one. The sensation I had up there, before reluctantly returning to my body, came back to me later. I was telepathically told, "You cannot die, and you haven't yet seen this street." And then I was teleported above a massive bridge. My appreciation for colors and the wonders of the world has grown. I was facing a small street that led up to a restaurant called Rule. True, I was unfamiliar with this street. In retrospect, I'm sorry I didn't discuss my experience with the hospital doctor, not with my cardiologist, who simply remarked the next day, "If the treatment doesn't work in 2 weeks, we'll fit you with a pacemaker." But with the one who regarded me as a rare case rather than a real person. I left the hospital the same day, with a new treatment but no ability to share anything. I had no idea what to do about what I had witnessed. Because I remained silent about it for a long period, my illness was considered as psychiatric, and I was labeled with mental disorientation.